5 months after we broke up, I ran into Theodore Levine in the hospital's obstetrics department. I was wearing a loose maternity dress, my hair disheveled. He stood there in a crisp, tailored suit, his beautiful and elegant fiancée at his side. "Theodore, do you know her?" the woman asked, tugging at his sleeve. His indifferent gaze swept over me and settled on the man behind me holding my prenatal test results. "No, I don't," Theodore said coldly. He wrapped an arm around his fiancée and walked past me, without a second glance. After that, my electric scooter accidentally grazed his luxury car on the street. He stared at my pregnant belly with open disgust. "Where's your husband? Have him come talk to me about compensation." I clutched my bleeding wrist, utterly bewildered. I wasn't even married. How could I have a husband? After I got pregnant, my eyesight gradually began to deteriorate. I was walking along the sidewalk when an electric scooter coming from the opposite direction knocked me down. The man panicked when he saw I was pregnant. Even though I told him I was fine, he insisted on taking me to the hospital for a check-up. He was so kind. Once we got to the hospital, he busied himself nonstop, registering me, helping me to get my blood drawn, arranging tests, until he was sweating profusely. Even the other pregnant woman nearby teased me. "Your husband is so good to you." I quickly explained, "He's not my husband. He accidentally knocked me over and insisted on bringing me for a check-up." "Where's the baby's father then?" the pregnant woman asked, looking confused. "You really should have your husband with you at a time like this. Otherwise, it could be really difficult if something happens." The mention of the baby's father made my heart sink. Theodore, I hadn't seen him since we broke up. We'd never been from the same world anyway. Now we were back to our separate lives, and that was for the best. But sometimes the world could be surprisingly small. I just turned around with the lab report in my hand when I ran straight into Theodore. My eyesight had been unreliable ever since I got pregnant. Yet in that moment, my vision was perfectly clear. He wore a perfectly tailored suit that highlighted his tall, slender frame. He looked a bit thinner, but his features were as handsome as ever. The woman beside him, her arm linked through his, was beautiful and gentle. Every detail, from her elegant dress to the last strand of her hair, was meticulously styled. In contrast, my loose maternity dress was stained with dirt. My hair was disheveled from the fall. I'd seen the online news about his engagement to her. I knew she was Valerie Jensen, the daughter of the Jensen Group's owner. She and I had always been worlds apart. As Theodore's gaze shifted, Valerie noticed me. Her eyes swept over me, her eyebrows furrowing slightly. She tugged at Theodore's sleeve, her voice soft and gentle. "Theodore, who is this? Do you know her?" I stood rooted to the spot, my legs heavy as lead. I wanted to greet them casually and compliment them on being such a perfect match. But my throat was tight and dry, and no words came out. Theodore remained silent. His indifferent gaze shifted to the man behind me. The man who'd knocked me over was holding the medical bills, calculating the costs. Overwhelmed with embarrassment, I wanted nothing more than to flee. I was terrified he might say something humiliating. Yet, Theodore just replied in a cool, flat voice. "No, I don't." Then he slipped his arm around Valerie's waist and walked past me, as if we were complete strangers who had never met. No one would have guessed that Theodore and I had once been madly in love. We were high school classmates, same class, same desk. Theodore came from a wealthy family and was exceptionally handsome. Dozens of girls at school had crushes on him. Some slipped love letters into his bag. Others gathered the courage to confess their feelings. Theodore grew tired of the attention. He hired me to pretend to be his girlfriend, just to ward off his admirers. The pay was good, and I desperately needed money at the time. So we struck a deal. Every day after school, all I had to do was pretend to go on dates with him. He really liked the desk this book had been added on your bookshelf. Each time, he'd order 2 slices of cake. It was all for show. He never touched his slice. Both ended up with me. He'd just sit there reading a book beside me. Because of him, I never went hungry. And I always had a quiet place to study and finish my homework. Our partnership worked out perfectly. He got the peace and quiet he wanted, while I used the money to cover my college tuition. It might have been a coincidence. We ended up at the same university. Our majors were different, but our classes were close by. He remained incredibly popular with girls. I had my share of admirers, too. When Theodore asked me to work together again, I said no. I wanted to experience a real relationship. I understood my situation. After graduation, romance wouldn't be so simple anymore. Family background, job, and income all would become factors in finding a partner. When Theodore learned why I refused, he still managed to convince me. He said I could experience being in love while still getting paid. It was the best of both worlds. So, we agreed, once more. Theodore and I started dating like any normal campus couple. We held hands, went out for meals, watched movies, all the usual things. At first, it didn't feel like being in love at all. It seemed no different from pretending to be his girlfriend back in high school. Until that Christmas during my sophomore year. My dorm and Theodore's dorm held a joint social gathering. We played Truth or Dare. Theodore chose Dare, and the challenge was to passionately kiss someone of the opposite sex. Since everyone thought we were a couple, the crowd naturally urged us to kiss each other. Theodore leaned close and whispered in my ear, "Is this okay? If you're not comfortable, I can take the punishment instead." His warm breath brushed against my earlobe, sending shivers through me. I clutched at my clothes and nodded nervously. When his lips touched mine, my heart skipped a beat. The cheers around us faded. Theodore's hand cupped the back of my head, drawing me gently but firmly toward him. His tongue parted my lips. The air grew warmer, and my heart raced. The kiss was deeper and more lingering than I'd imagined. From that moment on, our relationship began to change. The boundary between us vanished. Theodore began kissing me whenever he wanted, while we chatted, while we read, while we strolled hand in hand. Even if we'd only been apart for a few classes, he would pull me into a secluded corner, kissing me from my forehead down to my nose, then my lips. I pushed him away, gasping for breath. "Theodore, are we?" Every time I emerged from the haze and tried to sort out our relationship, his possessive kiss would distract me. He'd kiss me, murmuring vague confessions against my lips. Theodore said he'd wanted to kiss me for a long time, ever since the first moment he saw me. He'd held back that urge for 4 years. In high school, he'd wanted to confess, but I always seemed unapproachable. He feared that if he confessed and was rejected, he'd lose any chance to be near me. So he used our fake relationship as an excuse. When we got to college, he planned to confess properly, but I kept my distance. We'd spent 3 years together in high school, yet I acted cold and distant toward him, as if we were strangers. Theodore hesitated again. He worried that if things went wrong, we wouldn't even be able to remain friends. But how could I not like him? He was so dazzling, like a burst of brilliance that held everyone's gaze. I just never dared hope that something so beautiful could ever be mine. Once we acknowledged our feelings, Theodore and I dove into a passionate relationship. We stopped being cautious with each other. We opened up to each other completely. After graduation, Theodore started an internship at his family's company. I found a job not far from where he worked. Theodore's parents discovered our relationship. As the only son of the Levine family, the gap between our backgrounds was like night and day. Since I didn't meet his family's expectations, he was willing to give up everything for me and stand up to them. His father, Vincent Levine, deliberately undermined him. After leaving the Levine group, Theodore couldn't find a decent job. I kept getting fired from my positions too. Even so, he refused to back down. Once pampered and sheltered, he started working as a food delivery driver, braving all kinds of weather. Those days were tough, yet filled with happiness. It was the first time I truly felt the warmth of home. No arguments, no shouting, no empty kitchen. While Theodore went out to work each day, I stayed home to clean and cook. Even if it was just a plate of pasta, I made sure it was hot when he got it. At night, we'd lie snuggled in bed, talking and being intimate. It felt like as long as we held each other tight, all our troubles would melt away. Unfortunately, that happiness didn't last. The days passed one after another. I could see the light in Theodore's eyes, once bright as stars, had gradually dimmed, clouded with exhaustion. When we lay in bed holding hands and talking, he'd often drift off to sleep after just a few words. I stroked his palms, once soft and smooth, now rough and calloused. So when Theodore's mother found our rented apartment, I didn't hide as he'd told me to. In that shabby little room, I found some leftover tea leaves and made her a cup. These were the same tea leaves Theodore used to stay awake. His mother showed no sign of disgust. She accepted the tea and thanked me kindly. Despite her wealth, she wasn't the arrogant type you see in TV dramas. Instead, she was graceful and poised, her words warm and soothing. She said, "Sienna, you're a good girl. This little place is so clean and cozy, thanks to you. I can see that you and Theodore truly love each other. If I had the final say, I would bless you both." She paused and sighed softly. Although Theodore is our only son, his father has many illegitimate children. Once his father disowns him, he'll fall from being the favored son to dirt under everyone's feet. As a mother, I can see how much Theodore loves you. But what about you?
Sienna?
Do you really love him? Theodore's mother's words filled me with deep shame. They made me realize how selfish I had been. It was February, the weather hovering between winter's last chill and the first hint of spring warmth. Though wrapped in my coat in that unheated room, I still broke out in a sweat. I had once believed love could conquer any hardship. Yet I came to see that my love was nothing more than dragging the bright moon down into the
mud.
I made up my mind to let go, to return the moon to the night sky. I moved out of our rented apartment, blocked all his contacts, and disappeared. But Theodore still found me. His eyes were red with tears as he asked why I was giving up on us. I snapped back. Without the Levine family, what can you possibly offer me? A comfortable life? A promising future? I stared coldly at his stunned expression, my voice calm and steady. Theodore, I don't want to pretend anymore. I thought if I could be with you, I could change my fate and bridge the class divide. I never imagined it would be this difficult. Theodore, let me go. I want to make the most of my youth while I still have my looks. I want to marry into a wealthy family, have children early, and live a good life. I watched the light slowly fade from Theodore's eyes. He spoke, his voice hoarse. Were you only with me for the Levine family's money? I laughed coldly. What else? If you hadn't been rich, we never would have started. You know that better than anyone. Only the wealthy can afford romance. People like me have to struggle just to get by. How could you expect me to have real feelings? Even after all those cruel, humiliating words, Theodore still approached me humbly. His hand clamped around my wrist. Sienna, just give me more time. Even without the Levine family's money, I can give you a good life. I forced myself not to look at Theodore's hurt, dejected expression. I yanked my wrist from his grip and continued mocking him. I don't want to wait anymore. Without money, love just becomes hardships. When you hold me, all I smell is sweat. I was afraid to make a sound in this cheap apartment with thin walls. Theodore, why don't you just go back to being the pampered heir? Accept the wife your family chooses, someone from your own social circle. If you really love me that much, I can be your mistress. Isn't it good to have both money and love? All the color drained from Theodore's face. Sienna, you disgust me. With trembling hands, he slipped the plain silver band from his finger and threw it to the ground. I hope you get the life you want. He drove away. I sank to my knees, picked up the mud, stained silver ring, and whispered through my tears, I wish you a bright future. I discovered I was pregnant 2 weeks after we broke up. My periods had always been irregular, but going 2 months without one was unusual. It wasn't until I went to the hospital that I learned I was already 7 weeks pregnant. I couldn't go through with an abortion. It wasn't only about Theodore. I still had many relatives in this world, but none of them loved me anymore. 288 vouchers. There are many kinds of love, but a child's love for their parents is the most selfless and pure, an instinct untouched by self-interest. Guided by this selfish hope, I decided to keep the baby. In the early months of my pregnancy, I was still active enough to take on several part-time jobs. I didn't have expensive tastes, so while covering my expenses, I could still save some money. In my 4th month of pregnancy, my eyesight began to deteriorate. At times, everything would blur into a haze, making even simple movements difficult. The doctor said it was due to pregnancy hormones and that the symptoms might worsen as my pregnancy progressed. It might improve after childbirth, or it might not, in which case I'd need surgery. That was why I wanted to save as much money as possible before giving birth. After leaving the hospital, I ran into the man who'd knocked me over. Before he left, he pressed $150 into my hand. He said, "You're so young, and you're pregnant with no one to look after. I feel for you. Please be more careful when you're out walking." I thanked him and took the money. When you're going through tough times, there's no point refusing money out of pride. Life continued as usual after that. On days when my eyesight was good, I went out for part-time work. On bad days, I stayed home doing copywriting jobs. Perhaps fate wasn't done with us yet. Just 10 days later, Theodore and I crossed paths again. My electric scooter scraped along his Maybach. As I turned right on my scooter, my vision suddenly blurred. This time, I could hardly see anything. I lost my balance and tumbled off with the scooter. From the sound, I knew the handlebars had scraped the car door, leaving a scratch. Luckily, I managed to catch myself with my hands. My belly was fine, but my wrists were scraped raw, throbbing with pain. I could tell the cuts were bad. Warm blood kept seeping out. I had no idea it was Theodore's car. Too panicked to tend to my wounds, I just clutched them tightly. I couldn't even make out where he was. I just kept bowing toward the blurry figure, stammering apologies. Then Theodore's voice cut through. "Where's your husband?" The sound of his voice froze me, my whole body stiffening. I never imagined that every time I saw Theodore after our breakup, I'd look worse than before. My husband? I guessed he'd mistaken the man who helped me that day for my husband. That was fine too. Let's just go with the flow. "He's swamped with work," I said. Theodore laughed, a hollow sound with fury simmering beneath. After 3 years together, I knew this meant he was about to lose his temper. Swamped with work. And he still can't make enough money? He even lets you come out to distribute flyers while pregnant. Then I realized, my flyers must have fallen from the scooter's basket, and he'd seen them. Call him right now. Tell him to come here and discuss compensation. How ironic. 288 vouchers. Back in our shabby apartment, when we were barely getting by, Theodore never let me work. He insisted he could support us both. And he meant it. Smart and hardworking as he was, even delivering takeout, he always earned more than the others. He studied delivery routes carefully, memorizing even the most complex maps quickly. He completed more orders than anyone else, and faster too. The moment he earned money, he'd transfer it to me immediately. The sweet messages he WhatsApped me most often still echoed in. "Sienna, buy whatever you want. Get yourself some good food, and put on a little weight. You're too skinny. Holding you feels like hugging a bag of bones. Don't save money for me. Mind." The memories made my eyes sting, and I feared I'd burst into tears in front of him. I frantically fumbled for my phone. "Tell me how much it'll cost to fix the car and I'll pay for it. Let's settle this privately. I'm in a rush." Theodore scoffed. It was a mix of helplessness and disdain. "Is this the life you wanted?" I clutched my phone, my cheeks burning, at a loss for words. Suddenly, my vision cleared. I saw Theodore's gaze fixed on my pregnant belly, his eyes filled with open disgust. Fortunately, Valerie got out of the passenger seat just then. She slipped her arm affectionately through Theodore's. "Theo, what's gotten into you today?" Valerie's voice was soft, with a hint of flirtation. Her life is hard enough. Why make things difficult? It's just a small scratch. It won't cost much to fix. Why don't we just let it go? After Valerie's gentle coaxing, Theodore's expression softened slightly. He nodded and withdrew his arm. Eager to end this encounter, Theodore turned and got back into the car. Valerie looked at me, with a faint smile lighting her eyes. It's you. I think we met at the hospital, didn't we? You're pregnant. You should really rest at home as much as possible. There's no need to rush to make money right now. Her voice was lovely, like a clear spring rippling across one's heart. She was as kind as she was beautiful, and even took the time to help me lift my electric scooter. Be more careful when you ride, okay? Not just for your sake, but for the baby's too. As I reached to lift the scooter, I felt the wound on my wrist still bleeding. Blood dripped to the ground, leaving small stains. Valerie gasped. "Oh no, your wound is still bleeding." She turned to Theodore. "Theo, why don't we drive her to the hospital?" Theodore's gaze shifted to my injury. I quickly covered it. "It's nothing, just a scratch. I can bandage it myself at home." Theodore looked away and said flatly to Valerie, "Get in the car." Valerie turned, a faint smile touching her lips. "I'm sorry. My fiancé's a bit of a germaphobe." She got into the car, the scent of her perfume lingering as her hair brushed past. I was genuinely happy for Theodore. A man like him deserved someone equally wonderful. Yet Theodore's car didn't move. He leaned forward, looking past Valerie at me. "Get in." I was startled, and Valerie looked equally surprised. I waved my hands frantically. "No, really, I'll be fine on my own." Theodore cut me off impatiently. "Get it checked at the hospital. That way, there won't be any issues later." So that was his concern. "Don't worry. I'm grateful you're not asking for compensation. Why would I try to get money from you?" With that, I gave a slight bow. I got back on my electric scooter and hurried away. That night, I was cleaning and bandaging my wrist. There was a knock at the door. When I opened it, the smell of alcohol was strong. Theodore stood outside. He stood tall, his former radiance restored, dazzlingly out of place against the drab apartment building. Bewildered, I asked, "What are you doing here?" His eyes were dark, his voice cold. "I didn't come for you. I came for your husband." Before I could even nod, Theodore stepped into the room. His gaze swept over the shabby surroundings, his brow furrowing. "Where is he?" I lowered my eyes, my voice barely a purchase completed. "He's working overtime. Call him. Tell him to come home now." Theodore sank onto the couch, his chest rising and falling with suppressed emotion. Of course, there was no husband to keep up the charade. I didn't want Theodore to see me like this anyway. I clenched my fists. "What do you want with him? If it's for the car repairs, I can transfer the money now. If not, you should leave. We were once in a relationship. Now you have a fiancé and I have a husband. We're not on speaking terms." I opened the door, gesturing for him to go. Theodore stood, strode over, and slammed the door shut. What am I doing here? So quick to defend him. "I'm here to ask your so-called good husband. Ask him if he's even a real man. Letting his pregnant wife work like this." He tore at his collar in frustration, pacing back and forth to calm his anger. "Sienna, weren't you supposed to marry someone well off? Is this the man you found? How long has it been since we broke up? You're already pregnant? Can't you live without a man?" Theodore's words stole my breath. My mind went blank, a bitter sting rising in my throat. I raised my hand and slapped him. His head snapped to the side. My hand froze in the air. I never imagined I'd raise a hand against the one person who ever truly cared for me. Never dreamed he'd say such cruel things to me. When he looked back, his eyes were filled with remorse. "I'm sorry, Sienna. I'm so sorry." He pulled me into his arms, holding me tightly. I couldn't break free from his grip. I had to let him bury his face in my neck, murmuring apologies again and again. Theodore fell asleep in my arms. I struggled to help him lie down on the bed. Sitting on the edge, I watched his sleeping face. He'd lost weight. He was thinner than 5 months ago. His jawline had sharpened, and a coldness lingered in his expression. I still preferred the Theodore I knew before, because I understood the man lying here no longer belonged to me. His phone kept ringing repeatedly. The calls were all from Valerie. I couldn't answer them, and I couldn't let Theodore stay. It had taken so much to finally decide, to settle into our separate, peaceful lives. After a long hesitation, I finally called Theodore's mother. She arrived soon after with people to take Theodore. Before leaving, her gaze settled on my pregnant belly. I'd always been slender, and my belly was smaller than that of other women at the same stage, barely noticeable. After a long pause, she only exchanged polite words. "How have you been? If you need money, ask me directly. Don't go to Theodore." "I won't contact him," I replied. Theodore's mother, Evelyn Levine, nodded, then asked, "How did he end up asleep?" "He must have been drinking before he came." "Nothing else happened?" Suspicion darkened Evelyn's expression. Feeling offended, I placed a hand on my belly. "I'm pregnant," I said. Evelyn waved it off. "Don't get me wrong. Theodore..." She paused. "He hasn't been sleeping well. I was just asking." Evelyn patted my shoulder, her tone polite but distant. "You did the right thing tonight, but if there's a next time, I'd suggest you not let Theodore in. That young woman from the Jensen family isn't very forgiving and tends to be suspicious. She isn't very tolerant." With that, her gaze returned to my belly. "Take care of yourself." After that, Evelyn left. That night, I dreamed of Theodore again. The only difference was that the dream no longer consisted of just him and me. Valerie was there too. Theodore and I were in our old apartment when Valerie pushed the door open. She was crying, asking Theodore why he would betray her. She accused me of interfering in their relationship, calling me a homewrecker. I woke with a start, drenched in cold sweat. Words like homewrecker and other woman, those humiliating labels had haunted my childhood. My mother was the other woman. She always complained she'd been given beauty, but not a good family. So not long after I was born, she had an affair with a local businessman. I was only 3 when that man's wife came to our door, screaming in rage. I watched, crying uncontrollably, as she tore at my mother's clothes and hair. She spat on her and called her a homewrecker, a seductress. My father discovered what she'd done, but he couldn't bring himself to divorce her. He was obsessed with my mother's beauty, yet disgusted by the shame she'd brought him. The insults he directed at her were worse than those from strangers. I heard words like whore and slut almost every single day. Caught in their own complicated mix of love and hatred, they never felt guilt toward me, their daughter, nor did they show me any affection. Perhaps because of this unusual upbringing, I developed a remarkably calm disposition. 288 vouchers. I took everything in stride, never caring much about anything or anyone, until Theodore entered my life and disturbed the calm of my world. He was different from the other boys in our class. He never stared at my developing body, nor approached me with a sleazy grin to ask if my mother was a homewrecker. He always smelled clean. Whenever our eyes met, he'd offer a soft, gentle smile, warm enough to be kind, yet distant enough to never overstep. After leaning against the headboard for a while, I decided it was time to move. The lease wasn't up yet, so I knew I'd lose my security deposit. My landlady seemed regretful. She tried to persuade me. "We get along so well. You always keep the place so clean. How about I lower the rent a bit? Why not stay?" I considered it, but still declined. I knew Theodore too well. Now that he'd found where I lived, he would definitely come back. I didn't want him to know I was still single, and I certainly didn't want him finding out the baby was his. Otherwise, history would just repeat itself. A few days later, I was nearly finished packing. Valerie appeared at my door. She wore an ivory dress, her long hair falling in soft waves. Her voice was as polite and gentle as I remembered. "Miss Payar, may I speak with you?" The door closed, leaving just the two of us in the small room. Valerie's gaze landed on the luggage scattered across the floor, and she smiled at me. "Miss Payar, are you moving?" I nodded, and she chuckled softly. "You must realize this. No matter where you go, Theodore will find you if he's determined. If you truly want to end his hopes, Miss Payar, get married." I looked up, stunned, as she took a seat on the couch without invitation. She handed me a folder. "Here's Braden Hatherall's information." "Oh, he's the man who bumped into you that day. Take a look. He's quite well off, perfectly suitable for someone like you." Valerie paused, then spoke softly. He was more than enough for you. Her
eyes
crinkled slightly as she smiled at me. It was the same soft smile, yet completely different from the one she showed Theodore. Seeing I made no move to open the folder, she continued. Mr. Hatherall is 30, divorced, with no children. He's a local, owns his home and car. Oh, and he's infertile, so he won't mind that you have a child. I'd heard enough. I tossed the folder back to her. Miss Jensen, what are you afraid of? Theodore and I are from completely different worlds. Do you have so little confidence in yourself? Do you really think a pregnant woman could steal Theodore from you? Valerie's smile froze. Having no desire to continue the argument, she pulled out a card and slapped it on the coffee table. $150,000. If I'm not mistaken, Miss Payar, you're desperate for money. You wouldn't want Theodore to estrange himself from his family because of you again, would you? Take the money and do what needs to be done. Valerie was right. I did desperately need money. If I could go back 5 months, I would have thrown the card back at her with defiant pride. But now, I looked down at my pregnant belly. I wasn't afraid of hardship myself.
But
my child didn't deserve to suffer with me. I steadied my breath and turned to Valerie. $850,000. I have no intention of marrying, but I'll play along with your charade. After this, I'll leave the city. And put your mind at ease, Miss Jensen. Valerie raised an eyebrow, her eyes gleaming with disdain. You certainly aim high. She stood and brushed off her dress, as if something had dirted it. The money will be transferred tonight. You should get to know Mr. Hatherall. Don't let Theodore see through this. 288 vouchers. After Valerie left, she transferred the remaining money to my account that night as promised. I thought long and hard about accepting money to solve someone else's problem. I took the initiative and added Braden on WhatsApp. Valerie must have paid him in advance because he seemed to know exactly what was expected. We met a few times and exchanged basic information. Braden was of average height with unremarkable features. He carried himself well, standing straight. In a suit, he looked sharp and capable. I'd once told Theodore what I wanted in a partner. It should be someone local from a stable family. It would also be enough if the person had decent character and looks. Braden seemed to fit perfectly. That was probably why Theodore mistook him for my husband. A few days later, Braden and I went to Theodore's company. After explaining our purpose, the receptionist made a call. Then the secretary led us to the reception room. Theodore was busy. We waited over half an hour before he finally arrived. Braden stood up hesitantly, but Theodore was on a call and just gestured for him to sit. He hung up, sat on the couch opposite us, and casually crossed his legs. What's this about? Theodore glanced at me, his expression neutral. I'm sorry to bother you, Mr. Levine. Braden nodded respectfully, then placed a neat stack of cash on the coffee table. He continued, following the prepared script. My wife told me about it when I got home. So, I just found out she accidentally scratched your car. Theodore's brow furrowed slightly, and he didn't let Braden finish. He cut him off with a wave. My assistant will handle the car repairs. If there's nothing else, you can leave. Without another glance, Theodore stood and headed for the door. His indifference was so complete that I wondered if this whole performance with Braden had been pointless. But Braden was determined to see it through. I heard from my wife that you two were once together. Mr. Levine, we're very happy now. We're not wealthy, but both Sienna and I are content. So, I'd appreciate it if you'd leave us alone from now on. Theodore paused mid-stride and turned to face us. His expression was calm. I once had some regrets, he said. But now that I see Sienna living the life she wants, I wish her all the best. He glanced at me, nodded slightly, and smiled. Beneath that smile was the relief of someone who'd been through everything. It was as if his drunken indiscretion that night had been just a dream. The weight on my chest lifted, yet my heart suddenly plummeted. After Theodore left, Braden looked confused. Mr. Levine seems quite reasonable. Was all this drama really necessary for Ms. Jensen? I took a deep breath and found my voice again. Marriages in wealthy families require caution. That's understandable. And I'd appreciate it if Mr. Hatherall would see this through and drive me home. Braden nodded with a smile. Of course. When you help someone, you see it through. After leaving the reception room, I asked Braden to wait downstairs. I went to the restroom alone. As my pregnancy progressed, I needed to use the bathroom more frequently. When I was finished, my vision blurred again. I was beginning to notice a pattern. My vision isn't just affected by pregnancy hormones, it also changes with my emotions. Fortunately, I'd grown used to it and no longer felt the same panic as before. I felt my way along the wall out of the restroom. I heard footsteps approaching. I reached out and asked for help. Excuse me, I have poor eyesight. Could you help me downstairs? As a blurry figure approached, a familiar scent enveloped me. I froze, unsure what to do. It felt like the universe was playing a cruel joke. To make my final encounter with Theodore humiliating too. What's wrong with your eyes? Theodore asked, his voice trembling slightly. I tried to steady my emotions and keep my voice calm. It's the pregnancy hormones. My vision comes and goes. It should improve after I give birth. Don't worry. I can manage downstairs on my own. I started to pull my hand back when Theodore's warm hand closed firmly around mine. I'll take you. Theodore said nothing more. He led me forward, his steps slow and deliberate. The familiar warmth of his body mingled with mine, heightening all my senses. His breath was close, his heart beating just as loudly. We both seemed to understand this would be the last time we walked side by side. So we moved in silent agreement, saying nothing more. He escorted me downstairs all the way to Braden. He didn't let go right away. His hand tightened slightly before he said goodbye. Life became peaceful again. No one disturbed me anymore. I'd traded a passionate relationship for a worry-free future. All things considered, it seemed a fair exchange. Still, when I woke from dreams in the night, I thought of Theodore. I remembered the happy days in our rented apartment. But life went on, and the past was meant to stay in the past. I bought a plane ticket and left the city as promised, with no intention of returning. Before I left, I visited my parents. They were just as they'd always been, bickering, hurling insults, fighting, then making up moments later. It seemed nothing else mattered except their complicated love and hatred. And that was fine. They didn't love me, but they didn't interfere in my life either. What kind of life I led was entirely my own choice. Even when they saw me return pregnant, they didn't seem to care much. My mother said with pointed meaning, Sienna, I gave you this pretty face, not to waste it. It doesn't matter whose child this is. But when you find a husband, make sure he's wealthy, understand? My father snorted. Don't listen to your mother. The most important thing for a woman is to know her place and behave properly. It's fine to be poor, but keep your dignity. Don't follow your mother's example, ruining families just because she's attractive. Shameless. They began arguing again, and all the old memories rushed back. My stomach cramped with pain. When I left, they didn't even notice. Alone, I dragged my suitcase to the airport. I looked down at my swollen belly. In 5 more months, I wouldn't be alone anymore. I'll give my child a lot of love. I would even make up for the part 1 missed as well. Before boarding, Evelie stopped me with her assistants. She explained that Theodore and Valerie would be getting married soon. With the wedding approaching, she couldn't risk any complications. She already knew the child I carried was Theodore's. That's exactly why she couldn't let him find out. She wanted to send me overseas until things settled down. She also promised generous compensation so my child and I could live comfortably. Naturally, if I preferred living abroad, she could handle the immigration paperwork as well. I had no reason to refuse. After all, I was alone. One place was much like another to me. Theodore's mother arranged for me to go to London until the baby was born. She handled all the arrangements herself. Perhaps for the sake of the child, besides finding me a place to live, she also hired a professional caretaker to look after me. The woman was efficient and quiet. She never asked personal questions about me. It seemed she already understood my situation. She even reassured me that many wealthy families handled matters this way. She told me not to burden myself with morality and simply enjoy my life. I laughed in disbelief, not bothering to explain or argue. Compared to the struggles of my past, life here was comfortable. But the weather was constantly overcast and oppressive. I still missed home. I thought once Theodore and Valerie married, I'd return to America, settle in a small city, raise my child, and live quietly. I kept a close watch on the news from home. Yet, oddly, by the time I went into labor, I'd seen no reports of Theodore's wedding. Lying on the delivery bed, contractions washing over me, my vision blurred and cleared intermittently. The midwife held my hand and encouraged me. The pain must have been so intense that I began to hallucinate. In my delirium, the midwife beside me seemed to become Theodore. He bent close, his eyes warm and tender. He said, "Sienna, stay with me. We'll soon have our own child." When the newborn's cry filled the delivery room, my vision blurred again. When I came to, Theodore wasn't there. I knew it had only been an illusion. The midwife gently placed the tiny, swaddled baby in my arms. "I'm so happy for you." The baby was wrinkled and pink, not particularly beautiful, but tears filled my eyes. This was my child with Theodore. I gave birth to a baby girl. I named her Serena Payar. There was no profound meaning behind the name. I simply hoped she would live a serene and healthy life. During my postpartum confinement, the caretaker took excellent care of me. My eyesight finally recovered as well. Everything was moving in a positive direction. On the afternoon of my daughter's 100th day, I held her in the backyard, basking in the sunlight. Theodore suddenly appeared before me. Just like on that day's hallucination, his eyes were gentle, and he smiled at me. He reached out and hugged me. He spoke. "Let me hold our daughter." Before I could react, he skillfully and naturally took Serena into his arms. Theodore lowered his gaze to the soft, well-behaved baby in his arms, the corners of his lips lifting in a smile. "Rena's eyes and brows look more like mine. Her mouth is like yours, so small." Standing to the side, my throat felt tight and sore, emotions surging within me. Yet I still couldn't help but ask him, "How did you know I was here?" "Your fiancée, Valerie, where is she?" Theodore frowned and handed Serena to the caretaker. He pulled me into his arms, biting my lips in dissatisfaction. "Do you really have to ruin the moment right now? I've accomplished what I needed to do. 288 vouchers. My partnership with her naturally ended as well." "Partnership? What partnership?" I asked, confused. Theodore raised his eyebrows. "Just like the partnership between you and Braden." Suddenly remembering something, he grew rather displeased. "But that guy went a bit too far. Always calling you wife, wife. I haven't even called you that yet." It was only from Theodore's words that I learned he was engaged to Valerie. From the very beginning, it was made clear that it was a mutually beneficial partnership. Theodore wanted Vincent to lower his guard, so he could promote his own people within the company and prepare to seize power. As for Valerie, what she wanted was simple. After Theodore became the actual controller of the company, she would receive 2% of the shares. Originally, it was a win-win partnership, but Valerie developed unrealistic ambitions. It was precisely because of this that Theodore sensed something was wrong. He took in all the results of Valerie's investigation. Then, he secretly arranged for his mother to send me abroad, so he could focus on dealing with the company's old guard and his father's illegitimate son. Now that he held real power in the company, Theodore no longer had anything to hide. His life and his marriage could all be decided by himself now. I asked him, "If you hadn't met me at the hospital, if that unexpected car accident hadn't happened, would we have missed each other forever?" Theodore shook his head, telling me very seriously, "Even on the day we broke up, when he truly believed those hurtful words you said. But in his heart, he never gave up on our relationship. He was even certain that, except for him, I would never fall in love with anyone else. He wanted to grow strong as quickly as possible so he could come back for me. But he never expected that when we met again, I would already be pregnant. And the person by my side was exactly the kind of partner I had described to him countless times before. That's why he lost his composure and spoke insincerely. It was only after drinking that he finally gathered the courage to knock on my door. It was from that night on that he realized my husband and my marriage might be fake. Fortunately, fate was on our side. We didn't miss each other after all. Theodore and I took Serena back to our home country. We didn't hold a wedding. Theodore and I simply registered our marriage. But I knew the sense of security he gave me was far more reliable than any grand wedding. Evely adored Serena, saying she made up for the regret of never having a daughter. As for Theodore's father, I never got to meet him. I only heard from Theodore that after retiring, he settled in Hawaii to enjoy his later years. On the other hand, Valerie, I would occasionally run into her at gatherings. She married a husband from a family of equal status. She was still elegant and beautiful, but there was always a hint of fatigue in her eyes. Her husband was always surrounded by young, energetic girls. She constantly had to spend her energy and money to deal with them. When Theodore learned that she had once used the same tactics against me, he was rather annoyed, thinking she was malicious. I patted Theodore to comfort him. How is that malicious? $850,000. She's clearly a goddess of mercy. Theodore was dissatisfied and pinned me down. Am I only worth $850,000? If I give you $15 million now, would you take it? Even if you don't want it, you have to take it.